Welcome to the programme. I'm Yalda Hakim. We're going to start the programme tonight with some breaking news to bring you at the top of the world regarding the King's health. Let's go straight to our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, who joins me live now. And Laura, we've had a statement come in from Buckingham Palace. Could you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, that's right. This statement says that following scheduled and ongoing medical treatment for cancer this morning, the King experienced temporary side effects that required a short period of observation in hospital. His Majesty's afternoon engagements were therefore postponed. It goes on to say His Majesty has now returned to Clarence House and as a precautionary measure, acting on medical advice, tomorrow's diary programme will also be rescheduled. His Majesty would like to send his apologies to all those who may be inconvenienced or disappointed as a result. So news this evening that following that ongoing treatment for cancer, which he's been receiving for over a year now, he did experience what's been described as temporary side effects. No more details as to what caused them or what those side effects were. We are being asked not to speculate in this way, but we know that temporary and such issues like this are not particularly uncommon. The King now at Clarence House, where we understand he is in good form and is continuing his work, working on state papers and able to make calls from his study there. We know that he was visiting the London clinic where it's been treating him previously, and that the Queen didn't join him. We have had this from the palace saying that the King was due to receive credentials from the ambassadors of 3 different nations this afternoon, tomorrow due to undertake 4 public engagements in Birmingham, and is greatly disappointed to be missing them on this occasion. He hopes very much that they can be rescheduled in due course and offers his deepest apologies to all those who'd worked hard to make that planned visit possible. We don't expect any major changes to his diary in the coming days and weeks. And of course, with that Italian state visit due to go ahead in just over a week, there's not expected at the moment to be any change to that. And we're not expecting any further updates other than the news today that he did suffer side effects while undergoing his scheduled and ongoing treatment for cancer. It led to him having to cancel this afternoon's engagements that were due to take place in Birmingham tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, Laura, the King has had a difficult 2024, but he did persevere, didn't he? And we knew at the end of last year that his treatment would continue into the new year.
Yes, we've always been told that there wasn't going to be a running commentary on the King's treatment. We haven't been told, for example, what kind of cancer he has and what kind of treatment he's been undergoing, other than that it is a regular course of treatment. But news today, I think that he did experience side effects from that treatment is obviously a concern, but we are being advised that this isn't a sort of a major problem in terms of his ongoing recovery, which the palace is keen to point out continues in the right direction. But of course, it has been several months now since he's been undergoing this treatment. I mean, for himself, he will be disappointed. I think for him, part of his cure and getting through this has been to carry on with his work. He's known to be a workaholic. He gets a lot out of his work. And, the very fact that we've been told he's at home in Clarence House, obviously having to cancel today and tomorrow, but he is in good form, continuing to work on those state papers and make calls, very much a suggestion that this was a temporary side effect, that as far as the rest of his work, it is business as usual, other than the fact he won't be seen out and about tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, Laura, I remember when news came out about his cancer, so many people who knew him well were speaking at the time about the fact that he would have wanted to get back to work as quickly as possible. As you say, he's known to be a workaholic. So no doubt, again, not speculating about this latest news, but he would want to get back straight to business as soon as possible.
Absolutely. And like I say, I think part of his recovery has very much been for him to carry on, to keep doing the work that he enjoys and knows as monarch he has to do. He wants to be out and about. He wants to be seen. And he does enjoy meeting people. I think, well, when we hear that the palace says he hopes they can reschedule these engagements, he's greatly disappointed to be missing them on this occasion, that will be heartfelt from him. He offering, as they say, his deepest apologies to those who work so hard to make the visits possible. I mean, his diary is meticulously planned and planned well in advance, weeks and months, it's mapped out. So he appreciates, the effort it goes to getting him anywhere, and that disappointment that's been mentioned it is genuine, I think. But you get a sense of how busy he has been. I mean, today meant to be meeting the ambassadors from 3 different nations, tomorrow several engagements in Birmingham. So just those a day and a half shows how much he's missed. But I think we are getting the sense that things will be back to normal next week, and what's been missed this week can hopefully be rescheduled at some point. But lots of thoughts, I think, to Italy, and that big state visit's coming up. He's not going to be meeting the Pope because the Pope isn't well enough to receive such a visitor at the moment. But the rest of that trip will go on as planned, and that's coming up, in the not too distant future.
Yeah, Laura, we've also seen the pivotal role that the King has played just in the last few weeks. That letter that went to Donald Trump in the hands of Keir Starmer. He met with Zelensky soon after that blow-up at the Oval Office. And we were just looking at images just now of the King with Mark Carney, the new Canadian Prime Minister as well, at a time of global upheaval. So many leaders have turned to him for wisdom and calm, including, frankly, Donald Trump.
That's right. I mean, a lot is often spoken about the soft power, the so-called soft power of the monarchy, but I think we really have seen it hard at work recently. Keir Starmer knew that sort of hand sign note from the King inviting Donald Trump for the state visit would resonate with Trump, and perhaps that the King seen as this sort of neutral force in many ways, and a family that Trump has long held in admiration, and particularly the late Queen as well. That there was a role that the King could play. But it was very interesting, wasn't it, when Zelensky was in the UK, how the King invited him to that private meeting at his private residence in Sandringham. And, often talk, isn't there, about what they do, what they wear, the colours they wear and things. But I think there are subtle ways that the King can get across a much bigger geopolitical message and sort of be used as this sort of, as I keep saying, a secret weapon of diplomacy by the government in a world where there are so many fractures and divisions at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, we're just going to keep you right there and also just recap that statement from Buckingham Palace, which came in the last few minutes. And it said, following scheduled and ongoing medical treatment for cancer this morning, the King experienced temporary side effects that required a short period of observation in hospital. His Majesty's afternoon engagements were therefore postponed. His Majesty has now returned to Clarence House, and as a precautionary measure, acting on medical advice, tomorrow's diary programme will also be rescheduled. His Majesty would like to send his apologies to all those who may be inconvenienced or disappointed as a result. Well, let's bring in our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce. And Alistair, I was just speaking there to Laura about the fact that, the King's schedule is so meticulously planned. He is a workaholic. We know he enjoys these engagements. And when he was diagnosed initially with cancer, so many people were talking about the fact that he just wanted to get back out there. So no doubt he's disappointed. But obviously this is ongoing medical advice as well, that he needs to just take it easy until further notice.
I think for the King, who has been doing his work consistently with the need to deal with his cancer treatments, and clearly today something has occurred, and in order to get back to full output, he's taking the advice as a result of the setback today of stepping back. But with great courtesy, he has apologized. And I think everybody will understand that progress towards health for all sorts of people can be set with so many challenges. And for the king, who will want to return to the maximum output and contribution he can make, literally 2 days ago, I was standing in front of him when he invested me with some insignia that I received in the New Year honours. And I had a fantastic conversation with him. He was standing there for about an hour and a half, handing out honours and awards. So he is maintaining as best he can all the challenges and tasks that his role requires. And I think that hearing this now, particularly as I was chatting with him only 2 days ago, it's really alarming to know that, he is dealing with this cancer treatment while he is trying to maintain his duties as sovereign. And he is of an age where if there is a setback, very sensibly, the doctors are giving the advice that they have. And at the moment, it sounds like he's back home and it's only tomorrow's diary that's being looked at. So let's see how that goes. But he will have a big schedule because that's what he wants to do. And I expect, like anybody else who is dealing with any form of medical discomfort, people want to get back to what they do, and the king is no different.
Yeah, indeed. And you just talking there about the fact that just a couple of days ago, 48 hours ago, you were there with him and he had this engagement that lasted 90 minutes or so. We forget just how grueling this schedule is. And then on top of that, sort of managing soft power as well. I was just talking to Laura about the fact that he met with President Zelensky just a day after that blow up in the Oval Office. He, managed that visit of Keir Starmer by, sending that letter offering a second state visit. And of course, Mark Carney, the new Canadian Prime Minister as well, coming and seeing the King. So his schedule, is not just jam-packed, but he's having to deal with a range of issues within that.
Well, unlike most people in public life, and particularly in public political life, the king has been a part of all this world politics since he was quite young, because his mother, as queen for 70 years, drew him into some of the most extraordinary encounters with people all over the world, some of the great leaders that the world has seen. And so he is very comfortable in the company of those who are dealing with the challenges of the world, even though as a constitutional monarch, he has no decision-making capability. But he can convene, he can, by his presence, do a great deal. So I think that the fact that today, despite so much going on in the world, he's had a setback, I sense from Buckingham Palace that they see him back providing that soft power pretty soon. But it is always wise when there has been any kind of setback, particularly at the age he now carries, to take the advice of doctors and restore the maximum degree of strength and capability. Because as you point out, where he can be supportive in a challenging world, in support of not just the United Kingdom, but of the other 14 nations of which he's head of state, then that's what he's there for. And I'm sure that's what he'll want to do.
Yeah, and of course, Alistair, he has had a difficult 2024. We know the impact it's had on his health, the prostate treatment and then the cancer diagnosis. And we knew at the end of last year that it was going to carry on into the new year. So, this doesn't entirely come as a surprise, given the challenges he's had over the course of the last 12 months or so.
Anyone who knows cancer in their own family will know what a challenge it presents to the sufferer and to the family and to those who are trying to give help and support to them. It's a long and challenging process. And I think that we can assume that the king has the very best support in this process. And clearly today, quietly and without it appearing to interrupt his duties as sovereign, he has continued to attend for his treatment, and something obviously went slightly wrong, or there has been a reaction to what was done to him, and he's going to need to recover from that. If he was in his 20s, I'm sure that would be passed very quickly. But because he is a lot older, he needs to take that time. The system is one that will enable him to adjust. And looking at the way he likes to operate, he will find a way of making good on any engagements he fails to attend. It may not be immediately, but he's the kind of person who will do that. And obviously, with the Queen at his side and with other members of the royal family supporting him, they will find ways to make sure that those who are disappointed. But at the moment, I think anybody who knows cancer in their family will know that the key task for the king now is to recover and return to his treatments at the same time as he does his job.
Yeah, indeed. And when you talk about family there, I mean, the Queen has stood by him and supported him throughout. But of course, they've also been rocked by, Catherine Middleton's illness as well in the course of the last year as well. So the family hasn't just been dealing with the King's health, but of course, Catherine's health as well.
Well, countless families face cancer, and it very often hits more than one at the same time. And I think from that point of view, the royal family is able in its own way to reflect the similar challenges that others face. And I don't think that the king is unaware of that. And I don't think that the king would want in any way anyone to understand his situation as different from their own in their own family. But for him, there are very clear duties in supporting the process of government, not only in the United Kingdom, but also in the other nations of which he's head of state and as head of the Commonwealth. And as you were pointing out, in this very delicate position he seems to find himself in, where he is able to influence some challenging events in the world, he will want to get back to that and be as useful to the nations as they try and sort out the challenges they face as he can. But of course, facing those treatments, you can't avoid them. You have to deal with them because cancer knows no difference between kings and anyone else.
Alistair, when you saw him a couple of days ago in that engagement, was he in good spirits? I mean, I've had an audience with him a couple of times as well, and he's just always so present.
Well, he was hysterically funny, actually. He was teasing me and he was asking what I was up to at the moment. And I said, well, I find myself commentating on Sky News about events that you're generally at. So he then gave me quite a tough time. But at the same time, he was doing this with everybody who came through for their MBEs, OBEs and other honours. And I was quite near the beginning of the list of people he was going to see that day. And as I say, it took about an hour and a half overall. But he is adept at doing this. I'm sure he was as charming with everyone who came through. But for me, and if I can therefore reflect upon everybody who he interacted with, he made it a very special day for me and my family. So, this is what he can do. He can convene not only people who've done whatever it is they've done in the community, but also he can convene people at the top of government all over the world. And he can provide an environment where he pulls people together and perhaps they can deal with the challenges of the world. And I think that that is what he knows is his key delivery. And I think he'll be wanting to get better. But as I say, he has to negotiate the challenges of cancer. And cancer can show no mercy and show no quarter given to anyone, whoever they are.
Alistair, I'm just going to read a couple of other statements from a Buckingham Palace source. It says His Majesty was due to receive credentials from the ambassadors of 3 different nations this afternoon. Tomorrow, he was due to undertake 4 public engagements in Birmingham and is greatly disappointed to be missing them on this occasion. He very much hopes that they can be rescheduled in due course and offers his deepest apologies to all those who had worked so hard to make the planned visit possible. And that is very genuine, isn't it, Alistair? I mean, him. When he says he, offers his deepest apologies, he very much appreciates these events that are put on for him, his schedule, the meetings he has, wherever he goes. He's very much present in all of those. So to be missing them, especially when they are months in advance they're planned for, he knows the disappointment around this. But of course, those who would be waiting for him would understand that he is dealing with this at the moment.
I think he said that the statement mentioned that he was very disappointed. I'm going to offer some different words. I expect he's absolutely furious that he can't go to Birmingham tomorrow. He'll know how much effort the people of Birmingham, particularly the organisations he was going to, will have put into planning his visit. And he will know that he could have done some good. And that will really distress him, I think. And it is very much a part of the inevitability that if you hold such a high-profile role, and yes, at the same time, you're negotiating treatments for cancer, it's surprising that this hasn't happened more often, but it's happened this time. And I know he will be disappointed, or rather furious, that he can't go to Birmingham on this occasion. But you were mentioning that the statement goes on to say that apologies have been sent and every effort will be made to try and reconvene. You know, this is a role that isn't a job. It's with him every day for the rest of his life. And the fact that he's now challenged with this medical situation is a reminder that, you know, his mother for 70 plus years, day in, day out, had to maintain, as he is, the responsibilities of continuing kingship. It's an extraordinary existence. It's a life, a state of existence. And, you know, for him, it is a challenge that he has to deal with cancer as well. But, you know, on this occasion, he's been knocked back. On this occasion, it seems it won't be for very long that he takes to recover. And I'll bet he'll be back with a vengeance, trying to smile at as many faces as he can, encouraging and listening. And he always looks people straight in the eyes, listens to their story, and makes them feel heard.
You know, as did the late Queen, and you talk there about the late Queen and the role that she played in geopolitics and using the soft power, the respect that she wielded by global leaders. And we're certainly now seeing that same sort of thing for the King, certainly in the last few months when there has been so much upheaval in global affairs. We've seen the sort of respect that Donald Trump has shown to him, even in that blow up in the Oval Office. You know, when Volodymyr Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, arrived here, he went to see the King, and it just seemed to really bring down the temperature of that moment of tension.
Well, the King will have wanted to see Zelensky principally because he was encouraged and guided to do so by the Prime Minister and on the advice of the Foreign Office. And where the King can act in support in a constitutional way of the government of the day and the intention of the United Kingdom in geostrategy, then he will always do that. And I think you're right. I think it did play its part in trying to restore perhaps an element of confidence in President Zelensky after what had happened before he returned to the challenges that he faces also day by day. But, you know, Elizabeth II was very fortunate. She had a robust constitution. She was seldom ill. And we have a situation where the King has been hit with cancer very early in his reign, and he's having to negotiate it. Like so many other diseases, you can't tell cancer to go. It'll go in its own time, in its own way. And much of the treatments that are involved in dealing with cancer are immensely challenging for people's bodies and what they have to deal with. So we don't know what is going on or precisely what the treatment was. But what we do know is that the King, at the age he is, has had a setback today, and he's home now, and he's recovering. And I'm not surprised they've announced that he's not going to Birmingham tomorrow. And I think any of us who had imagined some kind of situation like that happening to us, we probably wouldn't be able to go to Birmingham tomorrow either. And I hope that very quickly he can return to his duties, because he'll be really annoyed not to be able to go to Birmingham, because that's what he's there to do. And he loves doing what it is his duty to do.
Yes, I mean, Alistair, to that point, even after the cancer diagnosis and when the world was informed about it, I mean, one thing became very clear. It was that he was eager to get back to work, back to his engagements, and he did do that very quickly. And even though we knew at the end of last year that the treatment would continue into this year, we were told things were looking very positive, and he still persevered and continues to do so. And you know him well. He will want to go back to work as soon as possible.
Yes, I mean, he became king, and almost immediately he was challenged with dealing with cancer. And it came as a great surprise to everybody because we're just not used to seeing our monarch dealing with such a challenge. Elizabeth II, as I say, was robustly healthy throughout her life. Yes, George VI, the king's grandfather, suffered in his own way, but it was a different age when monarchs being unwell was not necessarily so easily noticed by this constant scrutiny of the life that the head of state now leads. For the king now, he is always being watched. We see film of him almost every day. And when he is unwell, when anything occurs, it is naturally of great interest. And here we are discussing it. So today, going for a treatment quietly, he's been doing his cancer treatments without drawing any attention, going very privately to wherever it is he goes. Something occurred today, it set him back, and he's home again with the Queen now. And I'm sure he will rest tonight. And as I say, aggravated, probably furious that he can't get on with the duties that have been organised for tomorrow. Birmingham is such a key part of the United Kingdom. And whatever it was he was due to do, it would have been something he would have agreed to some time ago. Much planning would have gone into it. And I expect he'll do everything he can when he's better to find another occasion to go and see the good people of Birmingham and get on with what it is to provide the leadership that kingship can offer as a sense of continuity and the deep keel in the rough waters of time. And that's what a monarch is there to do. He learnt it from Elizabeth II, who in turn picked it up from King George VI, and Charles III is continuing that. And I think it just must aggravate him to have had this setback. And I hope he's feeling a bit better today.
Alistair, I don't know how much you know about the inner workings of how these schedules are put together, but, when something like this does happen and you see the kind of schedule he has and how tight it is and how well in advance it's planned and prepared, I mean, how do they go about sort of managing it so that it doesn't collide with other things? Is it just everything just becomes more squeezed? Because, of course, they would have had a lot of that in the course of the last year. Does his schedule on the days that he then is able to work again just become that much more hectic?
Well, the King's private secretary, Sir Clive Alderton, with the team of other private secretaries who run the King's diary, will have been managing the intent that the King has to meet all the obligations and duties that are given. And then a schedule will be made up, but all the time, Buckingham Palace has to make sure the King has time to go off for his cancer treatments. They're done very quietly. It's a private matter between the King and his doctors, just as it would be for any of us. And yet at the same time, they've got to try and make sure all that's figured in. The King has constitutional duties. There are boxes to be read every day, forms and documents to be signed and approved, and decisions taken, albeit decisions that have been laid before him and prepared for him. But this seen to be believed element of kingship means that the King likes to travel around the United Kingdom to visit organisations, and each of these, through the Lord Lieutenants of the counties and through the mayors of the big cities, they put forward ideas that they would like visits and what they would like visits to cover. And the King has things that he will try and include in those. But ultimately, it's meet people, encourage people, affirm projects, charities, institutions, things that people are doing in communities in order to try and improve life for as many people as possible in the United Kingdom. That's roughly what it's all about. And so when we hear tonight that because of a setback during a treatment today, the King has decided, whilst resting to get over whatever happened, he will not be going to Birmingham tomorrow. It's a big deal for all those who planned it. They'll be disappointed, but all of them will understand.
Yes, absolutely. Alistair, thank you so much for bringing us up to date and helping us understand the latest situation impacting the health of the King. Lots more on that story on the news at 10. We'll be live at Buckingham Palace. And now some more breaking news to bring you on the world. Australia's Prime Minister has called a general election on May the 3rd. He was the moment Anthony Albanese made the announcement a few minutes ago. Have a listen.
My fellow Australians, this morning I visited the Governor-General and Her Excellency has accepted my advice that an election be held on Saturday, 3rd of May 2025. Over the last few years, the world has thrown a lot at Australia. In uncertain times, we cannot decide the challenges that we will face, but we can determine how we respond. Our government has chosen to face global challenges the Australian way, helping people under cost of living pressure while building for the future. Because of the strength and resilience that our people have shown, Australia is turning the corner. Now, on the 3rd of May, you choose the way forward.
That was Anthony Albanese there. Now, if you were watching last night's show, you'll have seen we featured a developing story in Serbia. There's growing public anger over what happened to a large group of protesters at a rally 12 days ago. People described hearing a sound from hell that felt like it was rolling towards the crowd. Hundreds have offered similar accounts that led to accusations that the authorities, who have been contending with an anti-government protest for 5 months, used an illegal weapon to disperse the crowd. An acoustic weapon capable of rupturing eardrums and disorientating targets. After the incident, the country's leader denied using a sound cannon. Police and security officials went on to deny even having any kind of sonic weapon, but later they backtracked, admitting they do possess one. And that changing narrative is angering Serbians. We heard from one eyewitness on last night's show. Have a listen.
I just heard the whistling sound basically rising in pitch, and all of a sudden I saw these hundreds of people just getting towards me, running towards me. And the thing is, because of this, I thought it was maybe crowd psychology, maybe it was something like a mass panic, but it turns out it was almost instantaneous from all sides.
That was a demonstrator speaking to me last night. So what really happened on March the 15th? Well, joining me now is the Serbian ambassador to Britain, Goran Aleksic. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you for inviting me.
What on earth happened? What is this sound?
Well, according to the statements of our government officials, the President, the Minister of Interior, nothing was used at that day, and to somehow make it clear to everybody, an independent experts were invited to come to Serbia to do a thorough analysis of these statements, and I think the best thing is to wait for the results of that and then to draw conclusions.
But Ambassador, I mean, if I look at the statements made on March the 15th, the Interior Minister denied that the sound cannon was used on that day against protesters. This was maintained by the President, who said denial of even owning this actual weapon. Then on the 18th of March, the Minister of Interior backs down on the President's statements, clarifying that the state had indeed acquired the LRAD 100X. That's the weapon, while the President intensified the denial. So the President was denying that you even had the weapons. The Minister of Interior said you did have the weapons.
Well, I'm not the expert, but what I understood from the statement of the Minister of Defense, it was there is a kind of a loudspeaker which could be used to amplify the sound and the message to the crowds or to a place where we have to send the message. That was underlined a couple of times.
So you did use the weapon?
No, we didn't use the weapon, and I told you we invited people, experts from other countries to come and to make an investigation.
But what we've heard from the government is you didn't use the weapon, you don't have the weapon. Then they backtracked and said, we do have the weapon, we haven't used the weapon. Then the Minister of Interior said it's a technical device, not a registered weapon here, or not registered here as a weapon. Our people haven't been trained on it, nor do they know how to deploy it to harm anyone. It's useful for our units tasked with maintaining public order and peace. As for the sound, it's only used to warn demonstrators to disperse. But even that has never been used.
Well, as I told you, I mean, exactly what I told you. I mean, he said that there is a device which could be used to send a signal, a warning, and so on. But all the officials, state officials, denied using anything at that day.
I mean, you're continuing to maintain that, but we're seeing the government flip and flop over this, including the Minister of Interior.
Well, I'm repeating, let's wait for the experts, which are not Serbians, they are international experts, and they will do the expertise.
So would you admit that the Interior Minister is contradicting the President?
Well, I don't do these statements.
I mean, the statement that came from you was that Serbian authorities categorically deny the use of any sonic weapons or other military-grade devices,
yes,
which you're continuing to maintain.
Yes.
But the Interior Minister isn't necessarily maintaining that. He's saying that Serbia does possess this device.
Well, that you possess some device, it doesn't mean that you use the device. I'm repeating to you, let's see what will be the outcome of the foreign experts who will come. And
why did the government deny that they had this weapon to begin with?
Well, I don't know why the government denied. The government was very clear that the weapon, that nothing similar was used.
They said that they didn't even own it or possess it. The President Vučić, said, if we use this weapon or if we had this weapon, I would not be president today against my own people.
This was very clear statement from the president.
Are you disappointed in the president?
No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm representing here. I'm here representing the president. I mean, as the ambassador.
I know you are, but we're seeing contradictions between the different departments. The Interior Ministry is saying one thing. The president continued to deny that you even had the weapons. The Interior Minister admits that these weapons exist.
Well, I am repeating that if something exists, doesn't mean that it was used at that day. So I think that the statement of the president was very clear that nothing was used at that day.
The opposition MP, Marinika Tepic, stated that the Minister of Interior purchased 7 of these devices and 9 devices of Type 100. And after she then published a photo of this device mounted on a police vehicle outside the National Assembly on that day.
Yeah, it was shown. It was shown on I think TV, but it was not used that day.
So the president said that this device is locked up in a vault in the National Assembly. The opposition publishes pictures of it mounted on a police car. Which is it?
Well, I'm not an expert, but I'm telling you what the government is stating and what the president is stating, and I'm repeating. If we will have patience to wait for the independent inquiry of international experts, I think then we could continue this discussion.
But this is an illegal device.
Well, no, because it is present in so many countries.
I mean, if you know this it's prohibited under Serbian police law, the use of it.
Well, it is a thing that how to say it, was at that time was not used. So that's the fact of today. If we will wait for the independent experts to come to see what happened, then I'm repeating, then we could continue this discussion.
But Ambassador, do you admit that the opposition saying that it was mounted on a police vehicle outside the National Assembly, you say that...
Well, opposition could say one thing, the other, I mean...
You said that you saw images of it on the vehicle.
On internet there are different images of different vehicles and with different devices. And I'm not an expert of that, neither are you. So I mean, let's wait.
I mean, I'm just going based on what the government are flipping and flopping on this issue. Can you see why the Serbian people are so angry right now at the government?
Well, the Serbian people are protesting, but we, how to tell you? I mean, we enjoy this kind of conflicting democracy. I spend like it exists in France, in other places. I spent half of my life watching protests in Belgrade. We have a tradition of protests. We have protests now for a couple of months, but thank God, I mean, they are peaceful and they are from both sides. The government restrained of using any force. So I think that the only solution will be a political solution, a consensus, and then to stabilize the things and continue to work in peace, because Serbia enjoyed in the last 10 years an incredible economic growth. We were in the last, in 2024, the fastest growing economy in the region, I think in Europe as well, 3.8%.
And yet there are these demonstrations now.
The demonstrations exist because of what happened on the 1st of November. I'm speaking about the results that we had in the last decade, and the growing and the well-being of people, and then all the new, how to say it, developments in one country, especially in a country of tradition, they bring some contradictions. I mean, it is not only the Serbian case; it is a thing that other countries are addressing as well. So the Serbian society in the last 10, 12 years did a lot. We attracted so many foreign investors. We are the biggest economy in the region, fast-growing economy. We want to translate this economic success in the well-being of the people, to create opportunities for everybody, and that's our goal.
Well, Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us. And once that investigation is completed, we'd love to have you back on the program.
Yeah, thank you. I will come gladly.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, let's turn to the war in Ukraine now. And today, President Zelensky met with Western leaders in Paris to discuss their proposals for a peacekeeping force in his country. We'll hear from him in a moment. But first, here's Keir Starmer and French President Emmanuel Macron on their plans to support peace efforts.
Ces forces de réassurance, c'est l'objet de la proposition franco-britannique il y a plusieurs semaines.
These reassurance forces that was the subject of the Franco-British proposal several weeks ago are not intended to be peacekeeping forces. They are not intended to be forces on the line of contact. They are not intended to be forces that replace the Ukrainian military, but they would be forces from some of the other member states present, because there is no unanimity on this point.
Mais ce seraient des forces présentes dans certains endroits stratégiques.
These forces would be present in certain strategic locations pre-identified with the Ukrainians, providing long-term support and reassurance from the Europeans, and act as a deterrent to potential Russian aggression.
It's clear the Russians are filibustering. They are playing games and they're playing for time. It is a classic from the Putin playbook. But we can't let them drag this out while they continue prosecuting their illegal invasion. Instead, we should be setting a framework and a deadline of delivering real progress. And then we should hold them to that deadline.
Well, let's go straight to our Europe correspondent, Adam Parsons, who joins us in Paris. And Adam, we're seeing a lot of these summits now taking place, these conversations about peacekeeping troops. Is President Zelensky getting what he's trying to get out of these conversations and these meetings?
To an extent, yes, because what he's getting is a commitment from European allies and indeed this coalition of the willing, which is EU countries in the main, but also Australia, Canada, Turkey there today, as well as the European Union institutions, NATO, all railing in behind him. But he's not getting the United States at these meetings, and he's not getting massive boosts of military funding, and I don't think he's getting concrete promises. And so all of that is worth, he said it was a good summit for him. But you know what, Yalda, hanging over all of this is that question of, well, what about the US? Which way is it going? And a lot of European diplomats and a lot of Ukrainians are struggling with the fact that they feel they simply cannot rely on America at the moment. They don't know what the Americans are doing. And here's a good example of that. Steve Witkoff, who is the US envoy to the Middle East, gave an interview, a few days ago to Tucker Carlson, who's emerged as the sort of darling of the American far right. And in that, Steve Witkoff said that there were people living in Ukrainian territories that have been seized by Russia who want to be Russian, effectively, and who said that Russia had effectively a right to consider Ukraine as part of its own country. That infuriated Ukrainians, including Volodymyr Zelensky. Here's a little touch of what he had to say.
Сполучених Штатів Америки по русским.
One of the representatives from the United States, Steve Witkoff, he says things and it looks and sounds like he says it for us. But for us, the Ukrainians, they look on in an abstract manner. This is from another world. For us, these people are from another planet. We are at war.
So he said that America has to be stronger. I think Zelensky was trying to stop himself from going in two-footed on Donald Trump because he knows that ideally he needs American support. Keir Starmer said that this reassurance force would need American support. Everybody wants the US to come into line, but there is a sense, Yalda, that in Europe more and more they're thinking we have to come up with a plan B. We have to come up with something that we can deliver to support Ukraine that is not dependent upon Washington. And I think that will mean more military support. It'll mean improving Europe's capacity to make its own weapons. And yes, it will be some kind of peacekeeping force, whatever euphemism we use for it, that can defend a ceasefire as and when it is put in place. This is a coalition of the willing, but the big question remains, willing to do exactly what?
Big questions. Adam, thank you so much. Next, just how damaging will Donald Trump's latest tariffs be for the world? All day, we've heard condemnations of the plans that would see a 25% tariff imposed on car imports into the United States. There's huge consequences for the UK and other major car exporters. In Germany, shares in companies like Mercedes and BMW plunged on hearing the announcement, while the EU promised a robust response. Canada's Prime Minister shared his frustration.
When President Trump threatens us again, we will fight back.
We will deliver a firm, proportionate, robust and well-calibrated and timely response.
We're not at the moment in a position where we want to do anything to escalate these trade wars. Trade wars are no good for anyone.
The Chancellor striking a more measured tone, reluctant to fan the flame of a full-blown trade war. And that's because Donald Trump has threatened even bigger measures if anyone dares to cause economic harm to his country. He sees this as payback after years of the United States having a trade deficit with its partners. And despite many economists doubting his methods, he sees tariffs as the best weapon of choice.
Tariffs don't cause inflation, they cause success. It's one of the most beautiful words in the dictionary.
Now, when these new tariffs were announced, it raised some eyebrows. There's one car company which looks set to dodge the consequences above all others, and that's Tesla, owned, of course, by Elon Musk. It builds all the cars it sells inside the United States, shielding it somewhat from these measures. The tariffs only hurt Tesla because of the components it imports. In reality, these tariffs will help Tesla because they hurt its rivals more. What I also want to understand tonight is what the point is of these tariffs. Why are they Trump's weapon of choice? Will they as his promise revitalize American industry, make people living in the country richer, and not just his friend Elon Musk. Our economics and data editor Ed Conway has been crunching the numbers.
Usually the day after any fiscal event, you're talking still about that fiscal event. But here, the story is flipped back to this overarching issue. Tariffs, Donald Trump, what's going on there? And the Office of Budget Responsibility, in that update on the state of the economy, they did give a sense of what the impact of a trade war might be for the UK. This is their growth forecast that we've just heard about. Have a look at how it changes in the event of a trade war. So if everyone is imposing tariffs on everyone else, these bars are basically halved. So economic growth is essentially halved. It is much smaller than the expectations right now, and you've got higher inflation as well as that, and the impact on public finances. That headroom goes away. And right now we're learning more about what Donald Trump wants to do next. So this comes back to cars, okay? And this is a chart that he really does not like. It shows you US car exports over the years, going back to the 1960s, and imports. And the key thing here is that import line is far higher than the export line. And the difference between them, well, that is the trade deficit. The US sucking in more goods from overseas. And in the case of cars, it's rather a lot, which is why he's raising those tariffs. But that raises a question. How high are they going? At the moment, there's different categories here. At the moment, it's 2.5%. That's what's known as the most favoured nation tariff rate on cars. So on top of that, you're going to see an extra 25%, taking it really to quite a high level. But it's more than that, because it's not just the cars, it's also the components inside those cars that are going to be charged as well. That's going to be fiendishly complicated, but another 25% potentially goes on them. Then you've got light trucks. They are already charged at 25%. That goes back to the 1960s. It's called the chicken tax. The US basically didn't like the fact that Europeans didn't want to take their chickens, and they imposed a tariff on light trucks. Well, on top of that, you're going to have this extra 25%, so it mounts up. But God forbid, if you're making EVs in China, electric vehicles, look at this. So already you have 100% tariffs from Joe Biden, from the Joe Biden era. On top of that, there's another 20% that Donald Trump has imposed on all Chinese imports. You've got another 25% on any country that's importing oil from Venezuela. And then finally, that 25% that we've just heard about from Donald Trump, tot it all up, and you're talking about over 170% tariffs. It's extraordinary, really. Light trucks, 50%, and then components in cars at 27.5%, which doesn't sound like much anymore, but it is a lot. It is a lot, and it's going to be a big impact for all those countries sending cars to the US. And on this, Mexico, Japan right at the top. But look, the UK is actually the 6th biggest exporter of cars into the US. But despite these tariffs, Rachel Reeves says she won't retaliate.
We're not at the moment in a position where we want to do anything to escalate these trade wars. Trade wars are no good for anyone. It will end up with higher prices for consumers, pushing up inflation after we've worked so hard to get a grip of inflation, and at the same time will make it harder for British companies to export.
The Chancellor there. The US is actually the single biggest destination for UK car makers, meaning this is likely to have a big impact in the UK economy quite soon.
Ed Conway there. Well, let's return to that US security breach now involving a mobile chat group that leaked US military plans to attack Yemen. All week, we've heard the White House's explanations and denials, but what do voters make of it? Our US correspondent James Matthews has this report from Virginia.
2 months in, a time to put Washington in the rearview mirror.
Donald Trump is trying to do.
You don't know that the Chinese and Russians are on your phone?
Our world is now safer because of that mission.
In the parts of the country that made Donald Trump president. How does that chime now?
I'm impressed with the agenda.
I don't support it in any shape or form.
I'm okay with it. I honestly don't feel like he really cares about the American people.
Caroline County is Trump country. This place in rural Virginia voted for a change of president.
There's so much disinformation out there.
Change is what they got. What do you make of the Signal app story?
In my opinion, it's a non-story compared to some of the misgivings of the previous administration.
Still a big story, though.
Not to the extent that that it has the effect on our safety.
It just goes to show you where putting the wrong people in powered positions is not a great idea. That's all I'm gonna say on that.
I don't know a whole lot about that to speak on it, so I would probably refrain from talking about that because I don't know.
No, sure.
I don't watch TV.
Still not been sterilized.
This happened to be an afternoon when 10,000 jobs were cut in government health agencies. Another day, another 10,000. Radical change doesn't register like it used to.
We need this thing that we all deserve that's a part of, sorry, it's making me emotional, the American dream.
And do you feel you've lost that?
In some ways, yes. It's hard, but we just stay focused.
How politics lands with people here depends on who they support and where they get their information. On the Signal chat story, the response of the Trump administration has been to deny, dispute, and deflect from any notion of incompetence. For some, it's a stone-cold scandal. For others, not so much. Caroline County is known as the cradle of horse racing. Runners and riders are currently out of season, unlike the president that this place put in the White House. In his race, it's both a marathon and a sprint. James Matthews, Sky News, in Caroline County, Virginia.
Well, that's it for tonight's programme. The news at 10 is next with more on the King's health. Let's leave you with these images tonight of Buckingham Palace, where we received a statement about an hour ago saying that a number of the King's engagements were going to be cancelled and that he required a short period of observation in hospital. Good night for now.